Hey, look at that. Look at the timing. That's so fun. I almost got the timing down perfectly. Hold on. Except for the music thing. I've got to dial that down. How are you? Good morning. Hello and welcome. Good to see you. Good morning. Good Friday to you. It's not that Good Friday, but it's a Good Friday. One can hope for our dear friends across the globe. Good morning. Hi, everybody. Welcome to those arriving in the chat. Please introduce yourself right now. Introduce yourself right now. Or maybe even later, or not immediately. Okay, there you go. That's a funky set. Here to either join in or just join the yucks. Let me know. The Ecamm link I sent you, Philip, when you came on with Johnny, same link should work. So if you want to jump in, that's how you do it. I was just about to message you that very thing. So hello. Um, and it should work. If it doesn't, you just won't show up in my thing. And what? And yeah, got your birthday song yesterday. But I was with. Oh, that's awesome. Is this where the free chocolate cake is? Yes, yes. This is exactly where all the free chocolate cake is. Um, welcome. Hold on. Whoops. What was this? Oh, Jerry, thank you so much for the super chat. That's so lovely. Um, fantastic. Hold on. This has to be more featured. Here you go. Yeah, how about that? That's nice. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it. Um, there was somebody said Patton was on Robert Knowles yesterday. How do we get Hal on some of these right wing shows? I don't mind doing them. Um, a lot of them are afraid. Yeah. Every time I go to the place I get my boba tea, I think of Charmageddon because they only have medium and large sizes. The irony, and to think I was one of the early ambassadors of boba tea. Let's see. Copy that. Copy that. And then going to, just in case our dear friend Richard has not gotten it, Richard, I'm going to DM the link to you again in case you don't have it. So I'm sending it to you again, and that should get you on just fine. Yeah. Oh, who's the other? The other posters are that's Vibes with Jeff Goldblum, Cyndi Lauper, and Peter Falk, and that's Lab Rats with T.J. Williamson and William Brandt and Kelly Berglund and and the tallest member of the team. Let's see. Yes, there was a cat in my chair when I was getting ready this morning. This is true. Some of you may have seen that. They would never have Hal on right wing shows. They never have opposing facts on right wing media, let alone they do. They have opposing people on, but a lot of times people that they can either own or that they think exemplify a sort of physical dynamic. And no disrespect to David Pakman, but he's in the Tom Hartman side of the sports world. They view him as sort of you have to understand Fox News puts on people like Bongino and the like because they think that masculinity is a trait adapted out of brutish behavior. And so anybody who looks like they could give you, I think Pacman looks like somebody who could give you a really good suggestion on a book to read. If you just were sitting at a cafe and you're chit chatting with someone, he would like, I overheard what you were saying. And I don't know if you've read, Psychologically and the Terminal Mouse by Friedrich Anderson, but that book it changed my life, and I think you would enjoy it. Like that's who Pac-Man seems like he is, and that's why they have him on. Reporting on friendly fire attacks by Russian conscripts against their commanders, and naval transport vessels unloading more tanks and troops and supplies. Not surprising at all. And Philip, I just sent you that link. Hopefully you have it. But there's much to do. Hold on, let's see. Close this window. Yes, do I want to? Yes. Hold on. I have to save this for later. Okay. And then what the heck? You can clip stuff from this? Oh my gosh, you can clip things from this? And then what? This has got to be a mistake. Hmm. Sorry, I was yesterday when I was working on my computer, let's see. I got to have a output video monitor. How do we do it when we want to do it to do? All right, window, move to side. Mode, it's in mode, I think. Overlands recording, show it output. I don't use the Ecamm software that I'm using here, except on the road. So I'm still learning parts of it. Maybe it's on here. This, click on here. No. You click on that. No. Would maybe, oh, maybe this is it. Preview mode. I see. And then, oh no. And my headphones that I'm wearing are dying. So, because they just made a funky noise. Be right back. Hopefully, I won't miss out on anything. Uh, let's see. I don't know why these guys decided they wanted to take a crap all of a sudden. That's just rude. My old pair, though. So hopefully we should be all right. Let me see if I can. I got to do a sound test for myself. Nope. There we go. Yes. Whoops. Why does that happen so fast? Come back. Sound. Connect to them. I should hear a blunk blunk in my ear in a second. Hi, Michelle. That's very sweet. I'm glad I even in this harsh lighting. It's a good look though. It gives me an old western kind of a look. I look like I look like I have a triangle, like a Illuminati triangle in my forehead. That's so funny. Now I'm going to be staring at that all day. Let's see. I've got. Oh, Benny Loco, thank you so much. Then we go to this guy. Yep, that does it. And move this over here. That's too. Hold on. Yeah. There you go. And then I've got to move this way to crop myself right now. Got to crop myself right now. And then this is what I was looking at, by the way. This is Mario Scario, one of the Flashpoint dudes, doing a prophecy, and it's from 2022. So he's dating the prophecies now, so people can see just how good he is. Very exciting. So that was that I was looking at that last night, and whoops, this guy, and publish, and then go back to live mode. Okay. Yeah, we're good. So that was just to see if I could get my screen in the right place, but I might be covering that later, so I had to save that so I wouldn't lose it. And then somebody made a documentary. Let's see if I can show you this right now. Let's see. about all of like Jimmy Dore basically lying about his vaccine stance forever. Um, that's let's see, that's this right. This is a scene from this where he's Jimmy goes, "I never said that." There's a lot of "I never said that" in this. More like the Jimmy Liar show because he's a liar. This is the cover. This is the cover for the article, which I thought was or the videos, which I thought was particularly hilarious. Um, so I'll save that one for later, and I'll do that, and then I'll go. And now, because I've saved both of them, I can close that window and open another one so we can look at the trendages this morning while we're waiting for Philip. Let's see. There we go. Mm-hmm. Yikes. This is interesting. Hold on. We'll go to the. Oh, there he is. Look at that. Philip is joining us. Hold on one second. I'm going to bring him in and make sure that Philip can hear me, which I think he can. And then I'm going to switch over and I will add him left to me. And then, hold on. I don't hear you, Philip, but that's okay. We'll work that out. I muted him. I don't want to unmute. I want to unmute him. There we go. Turn him up. Hey, oops. It was unmuted. Now he's muted again. Guest has muted themselves, it says. I think we're fighting over.
Yes,
there it is.
I did mute
Yes.
myself because I had you on YouTube as well, so I didn't want
Yes,
to.
that's wise. Hold on one second. I'm going to bring you to. I'm going to bring a real screen of you on here. Wait, you should be. He's guest number
Do
one.
I get to swear?
Do you get to swear? Absolutely.
We're not on radio, so I can swear.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the upsides of this. And hold on. This is. Why does this not want to show guest number
Wait,
one?
aren't you sick of me yet, Hal? Come on.
Nope, there it is. Oh, I see. I've got you under guest Phil. No, Phil. There are people in the world I've had my fill of, as you well know, if you've been watching any of my show. The folks that I have to deal with on regular occasion that I have to that I talk about and that I address in their BS. Those folks, I got to admit, I get a little sick of seeing their faces, and not because I don't enjoy taking people down a peg that are of their ilk, but that a lot of them are just quite frankly boring now. They don't have anything new, and it's aggravating to even consider being in, like, oh, I have to deal with this idiot again, or I have to fact check the same lie again. You feel like you've done it already. It's like Doug Stanhope used to have a bit about abortion, and in another special, he goes, I already did a bit about abortion. Didn't I handle that for the whole world 3 albums ago? And sometimes I feel like that,
Yeah, or
So-
like Oswald Patton does his bit about the giant chicken leg or the KFC thing, and he
Right.
basically said, yeah. Or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they changed it. They
Well,
actually
if
were.
I get sick, feel free to let me know if you get sick of me. I'm just happy
Do
to
you-
be here.
I'm glad you're here too, and I'm glad you're all right so far. So good.
Knock wood.
Yeah. You were on Steph's show, I understand. I guess my
Briefly.
my minor arm twisting worked.
Well, I called her actually. I called
Oh,
into
okay.
her, and so she didn't know who I was, but she just knew somebody was calling her from Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did a name drop,
Yeah.
and once that happened, she kept me on for a bit, and we chatted, and I've sent an email to Travis, and maybe we'll
Great.
do that again. I would
I
love
ins-
to do it.
Yes, I
You know,
insist.
No, I'm here. I'm here trying to just wrap folks' heads around this stuff, because some of this stuff that I'm seeing coming out of the States, you're back stateside, so you are
Yeah.
kind of my conduit to that. And some of the stuff I'm seeing coming out of the States is getting worse, not better.
In which terms? I mean, I know
Okay,
right.
Marjorie Taylor Greene and her
Yeah.
whole discourse of, well, we just gave them support and we gave them hope, and we shouldn't be giving them hope because it's inevitability.
Right, because they're going to lose.
Beat them.
Oh my God.
And my message to her is, come on over.
Yeah.
Come on over.
Yeah.
And tell that to the Ukrainian people.
Oh yeah.
Just lay down your weapons.
Oh, and I got news for you. After this is all over, try and tour the world with that mentality. Like, I mean, here's the thing. Like, and I did a video about her most recent kind of kerfuffle about this thing, as you may have seen, and she is not of any genuine concern. She simply is not.
No,
but because she's a member of the U.S. government, she gets undue press worldwide because of our stature in the world. And this is, on the one hand, both embarrassing for the United States, but also exemplary of of our importance in the world as a country.
True.
Because even our lowest level, dunciest, small, minor corner of Georgia house people can have a ripple effect around the world about the perception of our country and a perception of our policies or our strategies in the world, which I think is the most important thing.
Well, and your audience is so lovely that they're now tweeting to me podcasts and things that they're saying, and they want me to chime in.
Yeah.
Somebody sent me something yesterday about a 90-minute, 45-minute, I guess it was, podcast between two people, kind of like, well, it's all America's fault because we kept encroaching on Russia and we kept encroaching on Russia. So what was Putin supposed to do?
Yes. Yeah,
we've heard. You and I have had this conversation, but just to reiterate, I mean, these people.
No.
Firstly, Putin was going to come here no matter what.
Yes.
It is repetition of Russian history that anytime they lose this territory, one of the first things they do when they regain their status, whether or not that is after the First World War or after the Cold War, or what have you, the first thing they try and come and do is take this territory back. It was inevitability, and the Ukrainians know it.
Yes.
So they were always going to fight this fight.
And that's why they get nervous about it, understandably. Every time they, because I showed an article yesterday when we were just kind of amongst all the other stuff that I have to show as I'm pulling stuff in to push back against some of this nonsense, about in 2014 when they put 40,000 troops on the border, which at that time, because of who had been running the country and who was currently in charge, and the fact that they were sock puppeting for Russia at that point, might have been enough to take the joint. But so much change has happened since 2014, and the election of Zelensky and the direction that the Ukrainian people had taken, that you needed 140,000, an extra 100,000 people before you can even think about invading Ukraine at this point.
Well, I was on Maidan in 2014, and I saw the initial ad campaign, and that's when I knew this was getting real. Is when the Ukrainians back in 2014, and they had Maidan, and the Russians had yet to take Crimea, but it was obvious that they were going to go for it. The Ukrainians started putting out a massive ad campaign saying, "Come and sign up! Come and sign up! We all know what's about to happen. Come and sign up! Come and sign up!" And the second I saw this ad campaign, which was like, or join the National Guard or join the Marines, those ad campaigns, but like come and join because this is an existential threat, not because, join the Marines, get to go to foreign lands and kill people.
Right.
Which is the old trope. I knew that this was real the second I started seeing that, and that these people were going to fight. And they weren't going to let it go. But this is a repetition. I've heard, I shouldn't read the trolls. I should follow your example and keep with the positivity.
Right.
But unfortunately, occasionally one sneaks through. And I did catch a guy kind of harping on me about you're always talking about history. You're not talking about what's happening now. Okay, if you want news breaking, we'll talk a little bit if we have time about what's happening here in the week and time since we've spoken about stuff that's happening currently. But the reason I keep bringing up history and kind of identity and all these things is because unlike us in the United States, and even I would argue in a lot of parts of Europe, this is living history.
Yes.
And every Ukrainian knows their history, and that this stretch of land in Europe has been transferred back and forth between powers, and they are living that history. And so that's why it's important that I bring this stuff up. And so I will mention again, here's another example. After the First World War, when the Tsars were overthrown, and there was the Russian Civil War, and the Bolsheviks led by Lenin fought off the White Army, what was the very first thing they did? Lenin said, in order for there to be a functioning global revolution of communism, we have to first take Ukraine. And then we need to push through Ukraine into Poland. And they fought a bloody war here, the Red Army, the Bolsheviks, and they only actually won it because they were betrayed by one of their own,
right,
in Kiev. And then the Ukrainians fell back to Poland actually, and helped the Poles fight off the Soviets. So there's a long, I mean, you can't understand what's happening here,
right,
simply by putting it through the context of what's happening in the last,
the other thing, and I'm curious about, because I've been doing a lot of sort of back study on Soviet tactics back in the day, the kind of stuff that Putin was steeped in. And I'm still, my belief increases every day that the fall of the Soviet Union in 91 was a rope-a-dope. I now am committed to that after looking at what they've done for a long time. There were true believers that thought they were moving forward in a lot of different areas, but the underlying, what we would call the deep state over here, the permanent folks that were still entrenched there, were like, nah, we're gonna lay back, and then we'll knock off this cream puff and take the place over ourselves at some point if they don't step aside. And so Yeltsin ultimately handed Putin the reins, and they didn't have to, he didn't have to fight gravity out a window. So those kind of things. But ultimately, once Putin got back in, then it was like, all right, we got this. Well, I'll just swap places with the prime minister, a couple of times to stay in office, and he'll do what I say. And we'll take Georgia, we'll run Kazakhstan as a puppet government, and we'll take Ukraine back, and then eventually we'll start expanding into, our border dispute area argument will be similar to the Ukrainian-Moldova border, where what we'll do is we'll pad our border offensively everywhere we buttress up against Europe, and in any area we can't take over. And Finland would be on the list. It would have to be over time, but a disputed border region would be enough. So,
I'll even take you one step further with that. Is that Putin understood that in order to actually effectively do that, he would have to weaken the West and drive a wedge between, particularly the Anglo-American alliance and the rest of the continent. And he's been working on that for a long time.
Yes.
And, look, you and I are both of the same mind about what happened in 2016. And the will out eventually, I believe. But, that whole thing was part of, we need to weaken the Americans. We need to weaken the NATO alliance, the transatlantic alliance. And only then will we be able to go for what we really want, which is our former empire, basically.
Right. And by the way, can you? I've got your mic turned up as high as I can on my end. I don't know if you can raise it on your end at all.
Boost it?
Yeah, just a touch. That'd be lovely. I've tried to do it this way, and people in the chat are wanting you to be louder. So.
Okay. Let me see what I can do.
Okay.
But anyhow, while I'm doing that, you go ahead. But I mean, you've got to. I mean, yeah, you're right. This is a long time coming. Putin understands the situation, but unfortunately, I think he overstepped.
There's no question that that's okay. So there is, I think a great example is, and we talked about this a little bit, was the obvious one is Russia going into Afghanistan and and the United States backing the Yusufzad and the Mujahideen and the Osama bin Laden linked folks, and what would be the seeds of the Taliban, which were just students of Islam who'd been driven into the hills by the fact that the Soviets, when they came in, destroyed 50% of all villages and cities in Afghanistan. I can't stress that enough, because a lot of people look at the American entrance into Afghanistan and the prolonged, nation building we were engaged in there, where we actively worked with the functioning government and the like. And
I'm just grabbing the microphone.
No problem. And most people weigh it as like, 6 of one, half dozen of another. We went to Afghanistan, they went into Afghanistan, everybody goes into Afghanistan, and it's the same purpose and the same result. Everybody left. Well, as we know right now, that the Soviets lost more people in Afghanistan in their 10 years than we lost in 20 in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. On top of that, so just as a battle plan aspect, it looks like a wash if you think these numbers are the same, except that it's twice as much time and half as many dead on the American side. And that's incredible considering what we did there. And when we were there, over time, girls started going to school. Shit like that was happening. Stuff that, with all of our faults of being there and all the difficulty of us being there, that was part of our plan overall. Was like there was no version of America staying in Afghanistan that didn't even have the presentation that we were going to do this to the rest of the world and to ourselves. You know what I mean? You couldn't even fake, military adventurism for us into Afghanistan if you didn't at least sell the idea that we were there to help people. Whether you believe we did or not is immaterial to the conversation. The American people, one of the reasons why we were on board and why we put up with being there so long was because women are going to school. They didn't have that right before. Malala Yousafzai, I'm going to blitz her name, I think, right now. The girl who was shot.
No, that's right.
Yeah, she was, that's a huge story over here, right? That's meaningful to us, as it should be, right? Mm-hmm. That wasn't during the Afghanistan raid of the Russians. They just were going to obliterate the place. It was just like they were hitting a reset button. They weren't going to save anything if they didn't absolutely need it themselves. So 50% of camps full of people, 50% of towns. If you live in a town, the town next door got blown to pieces. And I mean, it's like medical school when you're sitting there and they go, look to your left and look to your right, and if they're still there, you won't be. That was Afghanistan under the Russians, right? But the way people talk about it over here is like it's a wash. It's just, 6 of one, half dozen of another, right? And so the same thing is sort of true about Mossadegh and the Shah in Iran. If you listen to the story that we've all been told is that the CIA formed a coup to depose Mossadegh and put the Shah in. Never mind the fact that Mossadegh was aligned with the Tudeh Party, which the USSR had put into place. The United States, the Shah wanted to nationalize the oil, just like Mossadegh did. So the idea that Mossadegh wanted to nationalize oil and the Shah didn't, that's and the Shah wanted to make a deal with England that, 50-50. You get the oil out of the ground, it's our oil, but you take half for getting it out, because without your gear, without your equipment, we can't get it out at all, because at that point, remember, Iran is not modern in any sense at that time in terms of technological advance. Even oil extraction wasn't even that modern. It was a big advance forward for them. So they were going to do this 50-50 split. And Mossadegh, he's on board with the nationalizing part, but he basically doesn't want, he wants to overtake the Shah. He wants to depose the Shah and become have it be a communist, Russian-aligned government. That's what the Tudeh Party was. So the Russians push in, and they are paying people around him to push this support thing. And ultimately what happens is, and I don't know why people leave this out, but Mossadegh was a dictator of Iran for 3 days. When the Shah said, you got to get out. I'm making a new prime minister. I have the right to do that under the Constitution. You're gone. I'm putting in Zadehi, I think his name was. You put this guy in, and Zadehi or whatever, I think that's his name, came over and basically said, "Here's your papers, split," which is how their constitutional government worked over there. And Mossadegh said no, and called up the military, which was
Mm-hmm.
full of USSR sympathizers, and said, "I'm staying, and you're going." And it was the Shah that fled because they were going to kill him. Now, that lasted all of 3 days, and the people of Iran rose up and they drove out Mossadegh, and he hid in his house, and they surrounded his house, and he jumped over a fence and ran away, and he hid in a neighbor's house for like 6 days. And then they found him, and the Shah came back and ran the country, and he put him under house arrest for 2 years. He didn't kill him, even though Mossadegh was planning on. He just said, "No, in the name of us having civility here, I'll just let him." So the story we've been sold about this is very, quite frankly, long term pro-Russian. That's the angle the Russians fomented during that time because their coup failed. And the same thing is
Yeah.
true of Afghanistan.
Yeah. Now,
Afghanistan,
firstly, is my
yeah,
audio any better?
it's better. Yes, you seem louder. Everybody at chat room, let me know. Check one, check two. Say something.
Check 1, 2, 2, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
It, um, you could be a little louder, but I'll tell you what. I'll bring my.
1,
I'm
2,
gonna.
3.
I'm gonna bring myself down, and everybody at home can just boost their own, and we should be closer to even. And I won't blow you out. There you go. So, by the way, if you're just joining us, this is Philip
Okay.
Ittner,
All
and
right.
he's
Well,
in
we'll work it
Lviv.
out.
He's live in Lviv. Lviv and let die. Bow. And I think I did a pretty good job while you were doing your mic thing, filling time with history. So
Thank you. Thank you.
there you go. There you go. Now you're,
Mm,
yeah, right.
mm,
Stretching. We do it well. So, but this is, I'm
No,
amazed
but
in,
look, I mean, the
yeah,
history of, you're
yeah.
right.
This
You're right.
storyline,
I mean, the history of colonialism is deeply, deeply complex. And the Russians have an empire, and they had an empire, and they have an empirical state of mind. Um, and we've talked about this briefly in the past, but I'll reiterate it again. Uh, it may be a different, a distinction without a difference, but we may send in our corporate interests, just as the Brits did with what was the industry, the proxy corporation, the East India Company.
yes,
The
right.
Brits, the British Empire had the East India Company, and we have Shell. It's the same bloody thing.
It's,
So
yes,
it may be a difference
it is a
without
little different. A distinction
a
without a
distinction
difference,
without
right?
a difference.
Right.
But we aren't trying to annex
No,
Iraq or Afghanistan. We're trying to maybe rob them, which isn't great. Nobody's
right.
nobody's saying
Except we
that's a good
didn't,
idea.
because I will say
You
that
know,
that's what Trump
but
wanted. Trump's biggest complaint was, we got to take the oil. Why didn't we take the oil? Why aren't we taking the oil? And everybody, and the vast majority of the American people were like, A, we shouldn't be
yeah,
there in the first place, and B, what the fuck are you talking about? That's a war crime. We don't want their oil. We might want to buy their oil from them in the future and have first dibs because we saved them from monsters, and they'll be deferential to us. That is wholly different than seizing the
hmm
land, installing your own pumps, or in the case of like the nuclear plants in Ukraine, basically standing there with guns while the workers work on the place and go, "This will be a nice source of energy when this is all done."
uh, yeah, it was interesting how I just came back about 3 hours ago from a briefing from a military observer held at a press conference center here,
Right?
and they are deeply concerned not only about what they are doing with taking nuclear power plants because of the threat that poses by basically having a dirty bomb, but
Right?
also because the Ukrainians are deathly afraid that they're trying to control their electrical grid.
Right?
It's not as simple as just what's on the face of things.
Right?
They're trying to choke this country.
Yeah.
They've decided. Apparently, they have shifted their emphasis on taking territory, and they're now trying to starve people out.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to destroy the electrical grid. They're trying to destroy,
I
infrastructure
mean, it's
so
a
that
siege,
people are
and
less
by the way,
homeless.
this is
Um,
how sieges worked in the past for a long time, but they had to go on in a lot of cases for years and have no recourse because you can siege a walled city or a fortress because eventually, if nothing's going in, there's nothing, and by the way, there were no airdrops in that period, when this kind of stuff used to work either. So these days, you could have a walled fortress and have an allied somebody drop, food and munitions and stuff to you ad nauseum as long as their airplanes or their helicopters stayed, in the sky while they were doing it. The problem they also have is that it's an act of
well,
demoralization, and that's not going to work because it seems to be entrenching the feelings of the Ukrainians more, right?
Oh well, it was interesting. I saw an address by Volodymyr Zelensky recently. I think it was maybe it was even this morning, but if not, it was yesterday, where he came out and basically said they clearly do not understand who we are, and it's true that the idea that they're going to beat these people into submission is shows such a lack of understanding
Right,
of who these people are that Putin again. Putin likes to think that he understands this greater Slavic world better than the people who live on the
right,
territories he's talking about. Because he has this fantasy idea of a greater Novorossiya, a new Russia, a new Slavic world, and he doesn't understand that actually um, that Ukrainians are saying we can be Slavic and not follow your dictates.
right.
Those two things are not mutually exclusive.
Well, and this is where you get into Hitler territory. This is why I think some people make that comparison between him and Hitler's at least strategy or theories, based on the idea that Hitler thought that the Rhineland and the Sudetenland and Poland were really Germanic tribal lands before the Romans came and took them, and we're just taking them back, and that these people would rather be under ours if they're genetically the same as us, and the ones that aren't supposed to be there anyways. We'll deal with that later, but our people are surrounded in Poland. Our people are surrounded in these areas,
Mm-hmm.
and in the borders with France, for example. These
Yeah.
are Germans who speak German and live a German culture, but they're accidentally on the other side of a border and they're not being respected. This is the same friggin' storyline we heard from Putin about Ukraine. I mean, almost verbatim in this argument.
It's exactly the same as the Sudetenland. It's exactly the same as the Sudetenland. And
Right.
one of the things that started this whole conflict back in 2014, or this chapter of this conflict back in 2014, was that Kiev was actually proposing a language law that said the language of high schools needs to be a
Ukra-
single.
yeah,
You don't.
Ukrainian.
It's not. We're not banning the Russian language, but we're going to have a singular language that's
Right.
taught at our high schools. And the Russians freaked out
Right.
as a pretext, as an excuse. I don't think they really cared. I think they just thought, aha, we can latch on to that. And this is why when we saw Peskov talking to Christian Amanpour recently, everybody freaked out and said, because Peskov said, if we feel that we are under existential threat and there is a threat to our territory, that we reserve the right to use nuclear weapons.
Right.
And everybody freaked out about that and said, oh my God, what if the Ukrainians attack Russia? Which, by the way, they've already done a couple of
Yeah.
times. They've struck into Rostov,
Of course.
the state, the oblast called Rostov, where there's a lot of Russian military. So they've already done that. But
Right.
there's no way first off, the Ukrainians don't want to invade past Donbass and Lugansk. The
Right.
problem is that if you listen to what Peskov said, he said, if there's an existential threat to us or to our territory, then we reserve the right to use nukes. Well, unfortunately, they consider Crimea their territory, and they
Right.
consider those breakaway publics more or less their territory. So this is where we get into danger, is because the Ukrainians saying no, Crimea is ours. It was given to us.
I mean, technically,
and
if
we have
you
a history there.
technically, if you're
And
discussing it even like this, Latvia and Lithuania is their territory according to them, and they, existentially,
mm-hmm.
they now have a problem with the fact that those are under NATO and part of the EU. So it's already there. Like the
Yep.
pretext exists
Oh,
because
you
you're
want to hear?
backdating the
You
pretext.
want to hear something really terrifying?
Sure. I mean, who
Well,
doesn't wake up
if
every
you
morning?
look, terrifying, but yeah, terrifying. But I'm with you, Hal. We're
Mhm.
not going to blow ourselves up.
No,
We
not
as a
over this.
species are not going to blow ourselves up.
Nope.
Um, but no, not over this. And also, it's just, I mean, it's not in our nature. We're not suicidal.
Hmm.
Um, uh, crazy people are, sociopaths are, and if you give them access to the button, then things can spiral out of control. But I'm with you. I don't think we're in no rush to destroy ourselves.
Right.
But if you take these territories like the Baltics, or certainly the Baltics are bad enough, but if you take this stretch of land, everybody can make a claim to this stretch of land because at some point or another, every power that's in the neighborhood has held it.
Right.
So at some point, everybody can claim
Yeah, the Germans
sovereignty
could
over
claim
this,
it. The
except for
Vikings
the
could claim.
Ukrainians themselves.
Right. Right. So far.
The Turks could claim it. The Germans, the Austro-Hungarians, the Poles, the Lithuanians, the Vikings, the Russians. You know,
Right.
everybody, because this place has been this pawn that's been switched between powers for so long. At some point, everybody can lay claim to it, except for the Ukrainians themselves, which is why I get so excited about being here and why I feel people say, "Oh, aren't you afraid, or aren't you worried, or aren't you?"
Right.
I'm quite the opposite. This is an incredible privilege to be here. I'm watching the birth of a nation.
Right.
I'm watching a nation become a country, really, is what's happening here.
Right.
And it's amazing. And for the first time in their history, the Ukrainians, whatever that is, by the way, it's still a hodgepodge because of this shifting map and this game of risk that we've talked about, that there are divisions. There are the Galicians out here, they're the Polish border, and down south there are the Cossacks, and
Hmm.
there are the ethnic Russians in the eastern part, and there's the Odessans, and so there are different ethnic groups because the seeds were built here in the soil as powers move through.
Right.
But now, for the first time, they're actually unified, and they actually want to work it out so that they have a single country with a bunch of different ethnic groups. So, for the first time in their history, they're going to have their own country, and they're not going to let anybody, whether it's Moscow or Brussels or Washington, dictate to them.
Right. And especially, I mean, there's an element to which Ukraine is uniquely dangerous to the Vladimir Putins of the world, largely because it has the most potential to be the most American, um, you know, because it's been such a crossroads over time. Yes, there'll be a uniform language, like English is the uniform language of the United States, but that does not exclude the other cultures that have operated there or that have ties to the land. Blah blah blah. Which is very different than France, very different than Germany, very different than Poland in a lot of ways. Even though I would say that's the next big disputed land in those terms, especially over in the 20th century. So the fact that it could function and operate, as a pluralistic society that has, pride parades and all that kind of stuff is, the scariest thing to Putin because how do you have that right next door and and have your people looking at it and going, I don't understand. They have all that stuff and they're not falling apart. And the only problems they seem to have is when we start it at a certain point,
Yeah.
right?
Well, look at the protests happening in Russia. Look at the protests happening in Russia. And those people are really brave. And also look
Hmm.
at I don't know if
Hmm.
we want to segue into another topic here, but
Sure.
I do want to at some point bring up the fact that something funky is going on in Russia.
Hmm.
Something
Yeah.
really funky is going on, and we don't know what. But a lot of people are disappearing. A lot of people are
Uh-huh.
coming under. Suddenly, they have heart conditions.
Right.
Suddenly, there's a guy who died today. There's a guy who died today whose name is Vladimir Wolfovich Zhirinovsky. And
Right.
Zhirinovsky is a guy. I mean, he was on the scene when I was in Moscow back in the late '90s,
Hmm.
and he's always been a bit of a clown. But he hid some very serious stuff behind his clown persona. It was almost a Trumpian kind of persona where everybody kind of went, that's Zhirinovsky. He's a bit of a nut.
Right.
He's a goofball. Um, he says crazy stuff. But every now and then he would sneak in something wherever, when, months later, everybody go, okay, he had
Right.
that right. He was popping champagne corks on the day that Trump won, openly saying to the cameras in the Duma, the lower house of the Russian parliament, we did it. We installed Donald Trump, and
That's
he was
right.
popping champagne
That's
corks.
right. He was
You
the
know,
dude. Yep.
and when I saw that, I went, oh man, they really did it. Um, but he died today. Now he was not the healthiest guy in the world, and he wasn't
Right.
exactly a young fella, but the timing of his death. I mean, look, I am not a conspiracy theorist. I think
Right.
that it is entirely possible that he just led a bad lifestyle and the dude is dead.
And it's
But
really
coming
stressful
at
right
the, on the
now.
heels of the
Right.
disappearance, and it's really stressful right now. And
Hmm.
and say what you want about him, he was definitely a Russian nationalist patriot,
Right.
uh, for better or worse. But so maybe the stress of it all, sure, absolutely. But
Finally
coming
did
on
him
the
in.
heels, we haven't seen the defense minister in going on 2 weeks. We haven't
Hmm.
seen the um, we haven't seen the defense minister. We haven't seen the head of the army, the head of the uh, domestic intelligence group, which has a foreign or a near abroad department. The head of that department is under house arrest.
Right.
All sorts of stuff. There's some very, when it comes to people who could contest Vladimir Putin,
Yeah, they're dropping like
they're
flies.
being
Yeah.
isolated.
And well, and yeah, anybody who and
Yeah.
he's becoming. I'm showing this on the screen share. I don't know if you can see it. Um. I don't
I'll
on.
switch. I'll switch to
It's just a picture of him from the article
I'll
today,
switch
and
to a
this one actually
YouTube. I don't
says
see it.
this March 25th, 2022. It's doctors fighting for life of veteran Russian politician Zhirinovsky.
Oh, I got
Parliament
it.
speaker says right. And he's this is old because he's dead. Well, let's wish him a speedy recover," said Volodin.
Hmm.
Uh, um, so um, Vyacheslav Volodin said, he'll do great. He's fine. He'll pull through.
Yeah. I
Dead.
mean, yeah,
Um, so
yeah.
again, there's one thing.
That's
Okay,
a big deal.
it
That's
is.
a
It's
big
one
deal.
thing to say I don't believe in conspiracy theories, because that we are thinking, and even though you are currently in Lviv, where you are, with the mentality of people who operate in an for the most part, a functioning society. For all the BS and that the Freedom Convoy yammers about, and all this like the they them conversation about the other that runs everything, the Pentaveret that's got control of the earth. For all that conversation, the reality is most of the stuff we experience in the West, especially in the United States and in Canada and in England, is is it is what you see. What you see is what you get. If somebody keels over, most likely it's because they keeled over. Like I'm sure there are people right now who think Clarence Thomas has been dosed by some, evil cabal in the Biden administration so that they can replace yet another person, a conservative, on the Supreme Court, right? Never mind the fact that his wife Ginny was hanging out with the Freedom Convoy. They're all anti-vaxxers. They all just got COVID. And he's the one one of the ones who voted against vaccine mandates. So the chances of him being vaccinated are 0 to none. And he's in terrible shape anyways, and she basically brought it home to him. But it's Occam's razor. Meanwhile, a lot of these folks will use Occam's rubber
That's
mallet to
Occam.
concoct them. Yeah,
You beat me
Occam's
to
rubber
it.
mallet. Mm.
You beat me to it. You beat
So,
me. It's Occam's razor.
but when you get to somebody like Vladimir Putin, we're talking about a current war state and a dictator trying to maintain power when his plan is, I don't care what anybody says, is going to complete shit. Like this idea that they knew this. I mean, Sargon of Akkad, the dude Carl Benjamin, I think, was straight up just like, they're used to it. The Russians don't mind losing a lot of soldiers. I'm like, what the what? You just think, what do you think? Russian women are just robots and just like watching their sons die for nothing on something they didn't agree with to start with, and now they're like,
Hey,
if he comes
the
home, he comes
reason
home.
the reason they pulled out of Chechnya the first time they went into Chechnya was because there was an organization called Soldiers' Mothers.
Right.
And I have spoken about the power of the babushka in Russian culture before. Don't mess with grandmothers in Russia.
Right.
If they take to the streets, you're in trouble.
That's right. So
because nobody wants to see their grandma getting the shit kicked out of them.
Right, exactly.
Swear.
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why I think the videos of people protesting in Russia has reverberated around the world so much, because we have an idea of what protesters look like in our country, which is largely the only ones that encounter any violence from the police are people who instigate violence in the first place. Young, white, balaclava wearing, Portlanders who never liked the government and just kind of are piggybacking on George Floyd or something.
And haven't seen a bath in 6 weeks.
Right, exactly. And they're throwing stuff, and fighting back. But we don't see like the women in the Women's March, or even quite frankly, until they attacked the Capitol, the Jan Sixers didn't have any problems. They could have walked up there and been as loud as they wanted. There was a reason why they hadn't called in the National Guard, because there's never any intention of just, putting a foot down on people who were just screaming. It was when they invaded that it became an issue. But right now in Russia, what are we seeing? We're seeing videos of old ladies holding up little cardboard signs being snatched off the street. And the Russian government isn't even saying, well, that's made up, where somebody's faking those videos. No, they're going, yeah, that's what'll happen to you. If you pull that shit, old lady, you're going to end up in jail just like the youngins. They're bragging about it.
I've heard tons of stories. I'm still in touch with people who are able to get online via VPN on social media, and I'm hearing from my Russian friends who are putting out pictures and videos of what they're seeing in their cities, and there's a lot of dissatisfaction. And so that gives me hope. And somebody in the chat asked, what do you think will happen if Putin is taken out? Will there be a power vacuum? I'll briefly answer that, and then I want to touch on something we were just talking about. I think there may be a power vacuum, but I think that taking out Putin is going to be such a monumental sea shift for Russia, because it will be on the back of a defeat in Ukraine. So Russia will have to reassess, and it's going to put them back to basically the 90s. It's going to be a redo. And they're going to have to go back to the point of, well, who do we want to be? Do we want to be this Russia that we've always been, of this kind of like power structure where just power is used, boldly and just bald-faced, kind of like, I got power, you don't, you're screwed. The courts are only meant for us to arbitrate between the powerful and to subjugate the weak.
Right.
Or do we want to join the family of nations,
the civilized world?
I think there's going to be a major reassessment, if indeed. Yeah, I mean, there's going to have to be a major reassessment into. Well,
China's going through the same thing, and I got news for them. The Russians don't have a choice here, and I don't mean because of violence. They are going to run out of people, and they don't have enough arable land and worthwhile terrain for the number of people that they have already. And so maintaining that space and not letting it fall into decay, just the train tracks across the goddamn country, will require more people than they have available as workers anyways. And the Chinese aren't going to back them up, because their population's dropping in half. They're having to automate all the internal city stuff. And all these buildings that they built for the people that were coming, those people never came.
Yeah. Russia's problem has always been it expanded too quickly. Well, it didn't expand too quickly. It expanded too far. it's not sustainable, and so there's a definite possibility of a fracturing of the Russian Federation, and they're definitely afraid of it.
Aha.
So
Right.
Russia's going to have to reassess what it is. But going back to another point that we were touching on that I want to talk about, where you had mentioned that there is something within us, within our conservative. Well, I think there's a reason why our conservatives and the Russians and this kind of dominant Russian cultural identity, why they're fellow travelers, why they understand each other so well, and why Vladimir Putin thinks that everything is a conspiracy because he conducts conspiracies
Right.
himself. It's
Right.
projection.
Yes.
So they our far right or our conservatives or our, I don't want to
Yeah.
go back to my Lincoln quote, but I love it so much. But I mean, there is this kind of thing about like you're either with the idea that we
Neo-Confederates.
have a democracy
Right.
and we might, yeah, which
They're
were by the,
neo-Confederates.
well,
Right.
I'm not going to go into that, but uh, well, and they were also built by the French, and so they understood they were more interested in aristocracy
Mm-hmm.
than than
Northeast.
the Puritans and
Mm-hmm. And the
the
Quakers and the
Quakers and what
Pilgrims.
have you in
Right.
the Northeast. So right, exactly. And say what you want about them, but they also did believe in determination and
Yeah.
kind of like self identity and being an individual, and that was a gift from God, something that Russians and our Southern brethren, not just Southern, but that's the bulwark of it. Kind of they share that in common with the Russian identity, and
Right.
so I do go back to that quote because at the end of the day, the American experiment is fundamentally about: do you want to be a place where you're given certain rights by your very virtue of being human, or do you want to be a place where you got power, you don't have power, and if you got power, you better keep it, and you keep it by crushing everybody who opposes you, or do you have recourse to the rule of law and democracy? And
Well, and this
that
is
question is
interesting.
still alive and
Yeah.
well.
This is also a part of the modernization aspect of the world. This is one of those things where they are just running headlong into a bullet train, and they're gonna have to deal. No, I don't care if they think they want to run the world, and have their own. Like, if only we could do a Kim Jong Un thing, but for the whole planet, right? That it, which there is no future where that works, because technologically people are more interconnected than they ever have been. There is, VPNs probably will go down as one of the greatest technological advances of the 20th and 21st century, simply because they allow people to move past these barriers. I mean, they are literally, that you can do stuff with a VPN that somebody had to like tie.
Yep.
Many people know this. I have an uncle, Philip, and Philip, when was stationed in Germany, during the Cold War, around Vietnam, and that's where he met my aunt, who was Belgian and lived on the east side of the wall, and was teaching French and working there. And he was sneaking newspapers to her in his pants legs, and he worked on the military base, but he would go over there,
Ah,
and they told basically one day a couple of guys showed up and said they know, and the next time you go, they're gonna kill you. And so he sent
you go, they're
messages.
going to grab you.
Yep, and they sent word, and my aunt Sophie and him split and went back to the United States. They relocated my uncle back there, so because he was useless, he couldn't go back across anymore, and that's what he was there for. So they just moved him over, and so they came home, and I have a Belgian aunt who's since passed, but she, spoke French and Finnish and taught French at Vanderbilt, as basically a Cold War refugee in a lot of ways, specifically about this stuff, right? And we'll get. I mean, we can talk about the bullshit around the 90,
Well, why?
91
Yeah.
stuff
Why
too,
do you
but
think? Why do you think?
mhm.
Yeah. Why do you think that one of the most dangerous things that was happening in the Soviet Union was Radio Free America, Radio
Right,
Free Europe, and Voice of America, and that
right,
people would sneak cassettes of the Beatles into
Right.
into the Soviet Union, and they would pass it around amongst themselves in a kind of secret black market.
Yeah.
And that, the information, the control of information has always been fundamental to an autocracy or a dictatorship, and we have always been, we have the freedom of speech for a reason. It's fundamental to a democracy, and that just cuts at the core of an autocracy. So the
Right.
very first thing, I mean, look what's happening now with Putin. He's shut off Facebook, he's shut off Twitter.
Yeah.
YouTube is gone any minute now.
Everything the right
Um,
wing is
and
saying about
yet,
American
and
censorship
yet,
of the internet is happening actively by government fiat in Russia currently. That's the irony. Because everything I showed yesterday,
uh,
I did an Alex Jones video on my show yesterday that's on a site called BitChute, which is this free kind of it's the Craigslist ass end of video posting and the internet, but it's all there. Anything you want to see, QAnon stuff,
okay,
it's all
okay,
there. And the
yep.
government, you
But
know
you
what the
got to
government
understand, see,
Right. Yeah, you got it. We had the documents. The
what you got to do.
you know what the government is
Just
doing?
listen to Infowars.
You know what the government is doing about Rumble and BitChute? Nothing. The choice by YouTube to bounce some people is strictly because they want high end dollars on their advertising. They want to be the premier network, and having a bunch of like psychotic JFK is alive and wearing Trump skin videos, and we need to raid. We need to surround Dr. Fauci's house with
Well,
tiki torches. Shit kind of drives away the vacation ads for the
and
Bahamas.
why? What if you're the American government, if you're the power structure within America, and you actually do believe, because just like I think we in the media get a bad rap, I think people in government get a bad rap, quite
Yep.
often. It's so easy to snipe from the outside.
Right.
But if you're the American power structure within the government and you do believe in American governance and democracy and the freedom of speech, why would you shoot yourself in the foot by clamping down on that free
Right.
speech when all you have to do is give them enough rope and they'll hang themselves.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like I'm the hangman in that infotainment war that's going on right now
But
because I'm
along
like,
with that,
you got plenty
yeah,
of rope. Let me
yeah,
help you with
yeah.
that.
It's that Al Sparks guy.
Yeah,
That Al Sparks guy is
Alex
really screwing
Alex
with my
Jones.
plan.
It's Alex Jones.
But
Um,
did you see this idiot? Did you see this idiot in Minsk?
no, which one? Which
Did you
which
see
idiot
this
Minsk?
idiot? This. Yeah, be more specific. There's a January 6th
Oh yes,
guy,
yeah,
rioter,
who
who
fled? Right.
who defected in essence to Minsk. And my point to him was, and I tweeted this out, and your lovely audience got
Mm,
a couple of good jabs in and made some good jokes about it. But my point was, let this idiot find out what real oppression is. Let
yeah.
him go out and say boo, just say boo about Alexander Lukashenko. Say something even, hey, Lukashenko's losing his hair. Boy, he's not as masculine as he used to be. Boom,
Right.
you'll see what real oppression's like. I mean, it was only a year and a half ago we saw, tens of thousands of Belarusians going on the streets of Belarus and getting the crap kicked out of them. So
Right.
go ahead, buddy.
Yeah.
If you think January 6th was an infringement on your rights, say something about Lukashenko. Let's see what happens.
Right. And,
Oh, and
and
as,
yeah.
as long as we're talking about the Belarusians, they're not coming in. They're not coming in. No fourth front. Not going to happen.
Right.
He's got too much crap going on domestically. Lukashenko is not coming across. And by the way, I can attest to this. Spring is springing. The marshland along the Ukrainian-Belarusian border is starting to melt. The briefing I had with my military expert here today said, yeah, they can still probably do it if they want to, but they're limited to hard tops, which is highways, because
Right.
everything is melting and there's swampland between Belarus and Ukraine.
Right.
So they lost that opportunity. The Belarusians aren't coming, and Lukashenko's been playing both sides of the fence by sending tanks down there and suddenly going, oh no, we forgot our sleeping bags. We got to go back. And he's
Right.
holding back to Minsk. And
Yeah.
then he's gone. And then Putin's gone, go into Ukraine. and Lukashenko's sent his troops down there and go,
No.
oh, this time we forgot our bullets. We got to
Right.
go back.
Right. Yeah,
It's not going to happen.
no, it is not. And
It's not going to happen.
Belarus is currently, it seems, closer to Ukraine circa 2012, 2011, where the people themselves, if Ukraine
Yeah.
settles and it's its own thing, us being able to interact with Lithuania, Latvia, and Finland and Sweden on a much easier way, like if we were part of the EU, that'd be kind of sweet. That's where the people are. In the same way the Ukrainian people were there in 2011 in terms of where the Ukrainian government was going, and eventually they were on a collision course.
Well, and as the sock puppet, right, and the sock
Mm-hmm.
puppets that were in charge in Kiev, we're doing what the Russians are now learning happens when you have a system
Right.
built on corruption. The Ukrainian oligarchs were skimming off the top of the defense budget, which is
Because of
why
course.
Ukraine's military was castrated, and because of course. And now Russia's learning what that's like with their massive defeat here that's happening. But since that time. Uh, this is a world class military. This is probably the
Right.
second. I mean, we can argue about this and dispute it, but this is probably the second strongest military on the European continent if you consider Russia a strictly European power. I can't. I mean, Germany is now going to rearm itself, but that's going to take a long time. This country has been not only rearming itself, but modernizing itself, restructuring itself. Again, during the briefing I had today, there was a discussion of, one of the main things that we did with the help of NATO trainers was we completely restructured our military. So we do have a non-commissioned officer class so they
Right.
can operate far more independently. Whereas the Russians continue to use military doctrine from the 19th century because they're deathly afraid of some officer rising up in the ranks and getting
Right.
political
Hence,
aspirations.
hence the idea that you and I
And that's
started off.
true.
Yeah. Hence the idea you and I started off talking about in these terms, with with Putin being nervous about anybody around him who might be in a position to take over, and then all of a sudden, all those guys are falling ill or falling out a window. And I don't think anybody, as much as Trump is a pariah and a pain in the ass, and he has his MAGA followers, and he's doing his stupid rallies, and he's showing up at weddings at Mar-a-Lago and talking shit and all that. He left office peacefully. Nobody, even if he's facing criminal charges, nobody expects him to do hard time or live in isolation or not have access to his lawyers or any of that shit. Like all the stuff we take for granted. The New York DA is treating Trump like any other person. Everybody's been like angry that he's soft on crime. The right wing has
Yeah.
been mad that
Well,
the
that's why
DA
the
in New
whole
York.
lock her up thing was so offensive.
Yeah, it's hilarious. So, anyways, I put on screen the dude, this guy Newman that you were talking about. Newman, Evan Newman, Newman.
Uh,
Uh, he's the guy. He's
I'm,
from
I'm I'm ashamed to say he appears to be a Northern Californian, which embarrasses me as a
right.
Northern
Yeah,
Californian.
he's yeah. So he
But I know the
has
type.
he's wanted on 6 charges, including 2 felonies for assaulting a police officer. And they did a video on him called "Goodbye America." Yeah, take a look at my girlfriend. What girlfriend?
Well,
Anyways.
it's just
Mhm.
but he's also now talking to the bad thing about it, and I don't think it'll get any traction.
No.
But the bad thing is he's a perfect stooge for propaganda for them. So
Right.
they're all
Well,
over it about this stuff.
perfect stooge.
See, there's no law in America. This guy had to run away.
And by the way, perfect stooge. I mean, if he was like macho and like he wore an American flag everywhere and he was just like, I just want to be a patriot for my country, but the people who are taking it over aren't blah blah blah. That's the perfect stooge. This guy's just a stooge. He's just a doofus, and he'll have a short lifespan, like all the Chinese, the pro CCP vloggers in China that popped up over the years. That go on there and go, everything's fine. What Uyghur concentration camps? These people want to be here. They like being sterilized. That kind of nonsense. Like those people pop up, and they're useful to a certain point. But the vast majority of the American public has never seen any of these people. nor will they ever, even though their videos are all over YouTube. If you stumbled across them, you'd go, oh, is this a travel video? Oh, never mind. And then that's it. That's 100% the influence.
Well, there's a reason.
Yeah.
There's a reason why Vladimir Putin every year for many years has held an annual dinner in which he invites people of separatist movements around
Right.
the world, whether it's the Catalonians in
Jill
Spain or the
Stein,
Basques
Michael Flynn.
or
Yeah.
the Free or Jill Stein or the Free California movement.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy in St. Petersburg who is got a nice cushy apartment in St. Petersburg, who is one of the prominent members of the independent California. Oh, we could have the fifth largest economy in the world if we just broke away.
Right.
I mean,
Or
shut
break,
up.
and he has the same the breakup thing. So it needs to be, split red and blue for, and so the coastal cities are blue and everything inland is red. So they get 2 senators for people that make up like 8% of the population of the
Well,
state. So they get another free Wyoming.
look, I am a proud Californian. I love my native state. I'm partly a Michigander as well, but I'm a proud Californian. But I have to admit, we would not have the fifth largest economy in the world if we were not getting power from Hoover Dam, which is not in California last time I checked, or had the federal government or the infrastructure of the other 49 states. I mean, I
Yeah.
love California, and yes, the
Well, it's the
Central
same thing
Valley
with
is amazing,
Texas.
and
Like,
so
yeah,
is Silicon Valley, and
yeah. Texas only exists because of the protection of the U.S. military and the Border Patrol and all that other stuff. Because if we just decided, we're not interested in the territory anymore, that first of all, the Mexican government would be like, that parts of that used to be ours. Can we have it back? And then the other side, like the cartels would go, yeah, but we're going to take it first and we'll sell it to you. The cartels would take over Texas and sell it to the Mexican government, on a protection racket level.
That's so weird.
It would be Texas would
Yeah.
be the Rambo state. You saw the last John Rambo movie where he lives in Bowie, Arizona. But basically, it's just like the cartel guys are right over there. They got a tunnel that comes up right in my yard. That's what you would have, except they wouldn't need the tunnel anymore. Oh God, it's just dumb. Anyway, so the uh
It's
the
just dumb.
it's just dumb.
And it
And
plays into their hands, and they love it. And so the Russians play it up because look again, the Russians study us. We study how many enemies, how many adversaries do we have around the world? We have a Iran in the State Department and the intelligence community. There is an Iran desk. There's a North Korea desk. There's a Venezuela desk. There's a Mexico desk. There's a France desk. There's an EU desk. We study the globe
yes,
because we have interests around the globe. The Russians study the vast majority of everything that the Russians study is about us because they
yes,
are fixated on us. I mean, I watch Russian press releases from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs
right.
and the president's office and all the rest of it. Whenever we say to the Russians, you shouldn't be doing that. We disagree with your decision to do that, most notably here currently. And instead of them saying, well, we're doing it because we believe this, what they say is, yeah, but what about you, what you guys do?
Yeah.
So even though they're very patriotic and nationalistic and passionate, they always have a sense, I believe
That
firmly,
they're the bad
that
guy.
there is a sense of inadequacy that they
Yeah.
feel. That ultimately they know they're kind of screwing around. But
Yeah.
in order to defend themselves, instead of saying, yeah, we're screwing around, but we're screwing around because of this. This
Right.
is our reasoning. They don't do that. They don't defend their position. They turn it around and they straw man everything and they say, yeah, but you guys did Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan. And we go, oh, God, they're right. They're right. They're right. Oh, we are terrible.
Yeah, but we also did it. We
It's a
also
ploy.
all right. We also did it in retrospect. We were dealing with the USSR and since then Russia, and Russia and the USSR continually behave in this way. The United States, for all the talk about Project for a New American Century, wanting to take over 7 Middle Eastern states and blah blah blah, Think tanks can do whatever the hell they want in the United States. Anybody can float whatever idea you want, and you can have, again, there is somebody in the DOD gaming out the possibility of war with everything because that's their fucking job. It's not because the U.S. has plans to use Guam as a staging ground to take over Japan. But there's a guy who at some point was tasked, because he wasn't doing anything else, was writing up, what if Japan goes imperial again? And because we allow them to have a defensive military, how much of that military could be used for adventurism? And would they seize these islands and do this? And if they did that, would the Chinese react and cause a cascade of Gary, you know this shit, go write a paper. And that paper gets filed and sits in a file in case of emergency, break glass. Exactly. We do it all the time. And there is a distinct difference between hiring paranoids and putting them in charge of the paranoid desk and being overtly paranoid to the point where if we don't attack first, they're going to attack us, and then actually fucking doing it. So again, everywhere we were, Vietnam, South America, all these places where like the American government came in and did all these awful things in response to, by the way, adventurism by the USSR, which no one questions, even them. Yeah, of course they were making moves in these areas. Well, to what end? To what end? What is the USA when we come in? Not to be too jingoistic or nationalistic or patriotic about this, although I have no problem being this way.
Rah patriotic.
Yes, right.
I'm happily patriotic.
What is primarily the difference when we go in and somebody else goes, and the USSR and now Russia goes in? There's a huge difference. And even if it's just because the politicians who get in charge, the Dick Cheneys of the world, have to give lip service to the American people that we're doing some good, because we demand that as a people. None of that happens in Russia. I mean, the denazification, no. Please. We're there to kill people. There's Nazis there. We have to kill.
Nazis.
Right, come on.
There are more Nazis. There are more Nazis in Russia than there are in Ukraine. Give me a freaking break. I got to bring this up. And the danger of talking with a guy with an intellect like yours, Hal. Yes, that's pandering. I know. Mm-hmm. I'm smooching on you.
Right.
But the problem with talking with an intellect like yours, Hal, is that I may be telling you something you already know, but I'll chance it.
But the people might not watching, so you can.
Have you ever heard of? Fair enough. So I'll use it as. Have you ever heard of what is happening? Are you aware of what's happening at the Aral Sea?
Currently,
so the Aral Sea,
right?
Is this? Well, currently it's a fait accompli. It's already done, basically.
Right.
But the Aral Sea, because of a disastrous program that the Soviets installed, where they diverted power to Central Asia so that they could build cotton, so that they could actually so that they could create. Ultimately, really, it was to have like heavy weather clothing for their military.
Right.
So they diverted water from the Aral Sea to Central Asia so they could build a cotton industry, but they didn't realize that this would ultimately drain the sea, and that they had a little island in the middle of that sea where they had a chemical weapons plant.
Mm.
Now, because the sea has dried up, there are all sorts of nasty business on that island that have been a threat to getting out for years. So all of this talk of like, there are chemical weapons plants and bio plants in Georgia and Ukraine and all of the rest of that is, I mean, another instance where we could, if we were smart about it, say, well, but you've got that too.
Right.
You've got that issue too. I urge your audience to look into it. It's absolutely.
Well, I also think the you do it too part of it. Okay. Yeah. The you do it too part. The issue that I have with that is that by the definition that they were talking about, the quote unquote biolabs.
Vozrozhdinya Island.
Vozrozhdinya Island. Yes. You do, and you'll clean it up.
Anthrax spores were mixed with bleach and transported. It's just
Anthrax Island. Yours?
Yeah.
Yes. That was good.
Anthrax Island.
Right.
Yes.
For those of you that have watched Silence of the Lambs, yeah. Terns nest there, as shall be terns with us, Clarice. So, the problem with the quid pro quo, to borrow a Silence of the Lambs / Donald Trump phrase, um, or I guess with gold member squid pro row, is that uh, the biolabs that they're talking about in Ukraine, for example, are pathogen gathering labs that deal with things like wheat blight and farm animals that get certain
Yep.
diseases. Because look, China, and I've mentioned this on my show, and I don't know why people don't know this. China had to cull 700 million pigs in 2020. This has nothing to do with COVID. This is a whole other problem because of effectively a version of swine flu that's not going to jump to people, but sickens all the pigs and makes them inedible. 700 million pigs culled, just killed, just bulldozed into a pit and suffocated because they couldn't kill them fast enough because of this blight going through the pig population. That's one pathogen. Now, if that had escaped China and gotten to the rest of the world, it would have spread through wild boar and pigs in farms and eliminated all of that livestock in a matter of a couple of months.
Well,
And so, yes, right.
as you know, Hal, I am a
Mm,
dual national, and
mm.
my lovely adopted home of Great Britain
Mad cow disease.
Salisbury is going to be polluted with Novichok, and had cow disease. That's another example. I mean, not an example of weaponization of it, but if you let a pathogen loose in your country, and that's why they had these biolabs. But I mean, the Novichok is going to be kicking around Salisbury for God only knows how long.
Right.
But when I saw the Russians doing this in Ukraine, because I've had such a long history of studying Russia, and I was in Georgia in 2008 and have watched Georgia for many, many years as well, I went back and looked back at my notes and went back on my archives and said, it's the exact same thing.
Right.
It's the exact same thing. And they're just they don't all these arguments, and why it ticks me off when I hear talking points of Putin and Kremlin talking points and GRU talking points being mimicked and repeated by
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
It drives me absolute to distraction. Yes, because they know exactly what they're doing. And in addition to that, and it used to bother me. It used to bother me an awful lot because I would go, you know what? They're making good points. They're making good points. We do that. Oh God! But then I came to a realization about 5 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, but around that time. And it's this: if they really cared about this stuff, they would get their own house in order.
Right.
If they really cared about the rule of law, if they really cared about threats to the environment or threats to international stability or whatever it is, they would make themselves better, and then go, look, we do things right here. You're doing it wrong. They don't. They always look at through the prism of their enemy, us. Ultimately, it's us.
Right.
And they know that they can't defend themselves. So what they do is they project onto another.
Sure.
And they know that we are so self-conscious of trying to improve ourselves that they know that we will shoot ourselves in the foot.
We weaponize. We let our empathy.
Right their hands with this.
Yes,
they weaponize information.
Our empathy and our better character is weaponizable.
Yes.
And commodifiable, and they know this about this, and that's how they do it. Now, and one of the examples I would give is that when the Soviets left Afghanistan, they left mines everywhere. And they were these bright orange colored mines in some places because and kids would play with them. Yes, on purpose.
And colored that way purposefully.
Yes, so that they would kill children. And then after they left, they're just like they left them. The U.S. has not left a minefield behind in a theater of war ever that I know of, but certainly not since fucking Verdun. Right?
Second World War.
Where there was like no man's land where everybody did. So we were part of the cleanup afterwards. But and then
I think I think we used them in the Second World War, but there have been weapons
No, we
conventions
used
since then,
mines.
and we don't.
We didn't leave them though. That's the difference. We had an area. We didn't. We didn't.
Oh,
Right. And parts of
valid point.
cleaning up after we left Germany and after there was this stalemate on the western side of Germany, we started taking out mines or pre-exploding them so that they could have their society without a cart rolling over it and being blown to bits. We did that. The Russians are putting mines in Ukraine now with no intention to ever take them out until they blow up under somebody's foot, whenever the fuck that might be. And so anybody saying that there is a whataboutism in our way of life and what we choose as our constitutional values, however flawed democracy might be, and however much wailing and gnashing of teeth we do about our system, it is clearly superior to the laissez-faire, violent bullshit that has been sold as business as usual coming out of Putin's Russia, which is a resurgence of the way the USSR acted and is totally fundamentally different, not just from the United States, but from what the Ukrainians want, from what the fucking Afghans in general want, from what, you know, the majority of the civilized world, from what China purports to want. They themselves don't even engage in this kind of stuff because they can't afford to, because there's so much face involved in Chinese geopolitics that they can't. I'm sure they'd love to pepper the disputed territories between them and India with mines, but they couldn't get away with it, so they don't. That's it, because their people
Well,
are reactions.
we've talked about this in the past. I got into a massive argument with a dear friend of mine. I love him to death, but he's a raving, hardcore lefty.
Mm-hmm.
American imperialism is the worst thing that's ever happened to the
Right.
world, and screw you Americans and all the rest of it. He's a New Zealander. He's a Kiwi,
Okay.
and I love him to death. But he just can't stand. He just moves.
I
And so
could
I
talk
got
him.
into this massive
I could talk
argument
him
with
into
him,
a tree. I could talk him out of the tree. I could talk him out of the tree.
I'd love that. Oh boy, would I love that. I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Just get you two together in a room and let
Yep.
you go. But, I brought up the point, and I stand by it, and we've talked about it in the past, but the reason we get so upset about injustice is because we expect justice.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of the globe, it is their default position that there is no such thing as justice. That is
Right.
why we are so important to the world,
Mm-hmm.
is because we ourselves say, no, there does have to be the rule of law. Yes, democracy and human
Liberalism.
rights, these things matter.
Right.
And the rest, yeah, the rest of the world looks at us and either goes, God, I want that, or in terms of like these autocracies, uh, these cynical autocracies, especially the Russians in particular, look at it and go, what a silly bunch of naive. You think that people have human rights just because they're born? Ha! No, come on. You
Right.
think
Right.
courts are meant to be anything other than an instrument to bash the weak or the poor? Ha
Right.
ha. But we go around when we get upset when there's injustice in the court system. The rest of the world goes, well, what do you mean? That's the way, isn't that how
Yeah.
it goes?
Especially, and by the way, there are countries where they just kind of expect it because they've dealt with it for so long, that they've been under the thumb of an authoritarian government at one point or another, to the point where there's this kind of depressed. Well, I mean, it would be nice, but we don't expect it. Whereas the Russians, the current Russian administration, not and the Russian people, I would say, would feel like that. The current Russian administration is like, yeah, that's the way it should be. That enacting this violence, you know, by authority because we seized it is exactly how the order of the world should run. That is for everybody flipping out about the
Hmm.
New World Order talk that Biden said the other day. That's the old world order. That's how
Yeah.
it always worked.
Yep.
And that's why a group of
Yep.
democracies under liberal democracy, where people can have free speech, free association, freedom of religion inside these countries, and in each country, however different their cultures might be, there's a draw it. Well, our personality as a country stops at our border and doesn't impose it on yours. and that's cool. And then we get together and we see what we agree on. That's hence the United Nations. It is a joke that Russia and China are part of the United Nations, since they have no interest on a governmental level of uniting with the rest of the nations of the world. They are at point adversarial intentionally. And so, like, somebody brought up
Have you ever heard of
my.
or watched the wonderful British sitcom? Have you
Mhm.
ever watched the wonderful British sitcom Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister?
No, I haven't. I like that's been on my list for a long time, but it's way down on the list, unfortunately.
There's a wonderful scene. There's a wonderful scene. Well, it's a
Hmm.
wonderful show, and you should check it out. But I understand because there's so much out there. But there's a
Yes, there
wonderful
is.
scene in which the minister is talking. The minister is talking to his Mandarin, his deep state guy.
Hmm.
The guy who isn't elected, but he's the guy. He just goes through ministers, and he's always there,
Right.
and he's
The
explaining
Rasputin.
to the minister how it works and why. Yeah, yeah, or the Gray Cardinal, if
Right.
you know
Right.
from Three Musketeers. There's a great scene in this Yes Minister episode where he says the only reason that Britain joined the EU was because we figured we could do more damage within it than we did outside, and it has been our objective to
Right.
destroy the European continent and our entire history because we know if it's united, we as a little island nation are going to be screwed.
Right.
So
Right.
the idea that the Chinese and the Russians are involved in the UN as good faith actors
Right.
is getting to the point where it's almost just
It's comical.
it's just
Right. And
ridiculous because
somebody,
they're clearly not interested
Leslie
in it.
says, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, guys, but America, Leslie says, I'm sorry, guys, but America, especially now, is not perfect, nor should we try to shove your beliefs, I guess she means our, but whatever, and culture on other countries. We don't. Liberal democracy is you have your own culture, you have your own belief, and your people should have the right to express theirs as individuals. And we weren't trying to turn Ukraine into a democracy against its will. Russia is trying to stop it from being a burgeoning democracy by its own choice. We are defending an equal belief system. The other thing, too, is perfection is never going to be the goal in a democracy. And that's exactly the point. You can't be perfect in a
Yeah.
cumulative society. Perfection in terms of governmental rule only comes under dictatorship or autocracy, where they can create. We have the perfect government now. We are in charge, and no one else has a shot. That's monarchies.
Yeah.
That's
It's
theocracies.
an experiment. It's ongoing.
Right. It's never meant to be. And by the way,
Yeah.
somebody was
In
also
order to
saying there's
form a
mines
more
in, hold
perfect
on, there's
union.
mines in Vietnam, and there's been a bunch of people killed since 1975. Go look up the Chinese war with Vietnam and how those mines got there. The Chinese have had two wars with Vietnam since the 60s. So go look up why and where those are. That's another thing. Um, Mines left behind are hateful. I agree. And as Americans, that's the standard we should have. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And if we screwed it up, we should fix it.
Yeah. And that's how we as Americans believe. That's how a lot of us vote. Even, this is where the arc of, of history leans towards progress. That's one of the reasons, because the vast majority of people what would be considered the political center of the United States, which is by volume the greatest voting bloc here, who view themselves as Christian right, in the softest possible terms, or liberal left, progressive left on in the softest possible terms. All those people at the same time go, well, the one thing we can't agree on is nobody wants mines left behind, so children think they're a toy, go over and pick them up and have their fucking face blown off. We don't believe that. We're not going to believe that. And no leader of our country can run on a screw 'em ticket about that stuff. It's not possible. That's not true in other countries. I mean, right now there was footage, and I showed this on this Infowars footage that came out of a Dutch neo-Nazi group, that showed children in Ukraine saying "Slava Ukraine," praise Ukraine, with their fist in the air, and the assertion made by the Alex Jones temp that was working there, whatever his name is, who fills in when Alex is too sick to be deposed in a legal proceeding. He was making the point that that fist in the air was the same as the Hitler salute. And that I mean, that was a talking point straight out of Russia, straight like these little kids are Nazis. They're not future Nazis. They're Nazis right now. They're 9 and 10-year-olds, and if we don't kill them, they're going to grow up to be. We're already past the intervention, stop Hitler from turning into Hitler by teaching him how to, like giving him an art degree and teaching and hugging him more as a kid. We're already past the point. These kids are 10 years old and they're going to turn into Nazis, and by 8 years old, in 8 more years, they're going to be military age Nazis with guns in their hands. And that's the story they're telling. There is no way, no way in the United States, especially in the mainstream media, that you could put footage of Russian children, even the ones saying, we fight for Russia, that anybody over here would have anything but pity for those kids. You'd go, those kids are being brainwashed. We have to intervene. We have to let those kids know we don't mean them ill. And our president will go out and like, we don't mean any ill to the Russian people. And those kids need to know we mean them no harm. Not, oh my God, Russia is growing a crop of little Nazis. There is no situation where the mainstream media in the United States is selling that. None. So the idea that it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, those folks can go pound sand. I'm tired of it. Like it, and the problem is the equivalence is this is the same thing, by the way, that the right does about sexual assault and consent. When they deal with the fact that there's a difference between violent sexual assault and sexual harassment, what most of us are doing is there should be laws about somebody in the workplace and all that kind of stuff. We're trying to work out the issues that people have in interpersonal areas. And what they're saying is that women lie about this stuff, so they're probably lying about the rape too. That's what the right does with this conversation. They take the lower end of it and they try to elevate it to bring down the seriousness of the actual like violent, horrible. They're like, I don't even know if I believe the women are being sexually assaulted. They lie about that stuff too. If they're going to lie in the workplace, what's the difference, right? Yes. They do the same shit.
Yeah. I'm seeing people in the chat saying, I'm talking over you. It's not
It's
purposeful.
a delay.
We have a technical issue.
Right.
There's a delay. I apologize. It's not my attempt to talk over Hal. So please don't take it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, when we talk about, yes, we left mines in Vietnam, or we left debris. We also did Agent Orange in Vietnam. We did a whole bunch of terrible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That and it's a minor. We still did it. We left depleted uranium rounds in Iraq from the Persian Gulf War.
We got our own soldiers. We gave our own soldiers cancer doing that. And we're not going to do it again. That's the point. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the other difference is we I know it's weak sauce, but when we recognize it, we try to fix it. And that's different than a lot of countries around the world, especially the powerful countries who say, and the autocracies in particular, who say, screw it.
Right.
So
no, it's a feature, not a bug.
We're a work in progress.
Right.
But it's
exactly.
Yes.
And I know people are doing the same thing. They're throwing stuff in the thing, like the issues we have with law enforcement inside the country. And again, these are things we as a country need to work on, but they are wholly different than the absolute eradication of the right to even be upset about that in a bunch of these other countries. And that's the difference between if Ukraine is taken by one side or the other, what's the difference? An imperfect situation where people have the rule of law protecting them, or absolute autocracy where they can be rounded up simply for saying the wrong thing. And there is a difference. And saying there isn't, or whatabouting is a total attack on the cleanup you're trying to make, on the actual meaning of, yeah, that's why we're trying to improve our system, because we believe these things.
Okay. Yes. And I see I'm responding to the occasional chat thing here because I love the interaction
Sure.
that this allows us. And somebody asked me what's the condition, what's the situation of our embassy in Ukraine. Um, I'm in Lviv. The diplomatic corps here in Ukraine pulled back to Lviv. It's one of the reasons why I actually chose Lviv, because I wanted the dateline of being in Ukraine so that I would be able to speak at this. And I am under certain risk, but not under massive risk like they are in Kiev
Right.
or in farther eastern locations. But the diplomatic corps pulled back to Lviv. The British ambassador has left. The French are still here. The Germans, I believe, are still here. Most of the European Union are still here, but they pulled out of the capital and now in Lviv. Our diplomatic corps came to Lviv for all of about a week and then said, "Screw this! It's too dangerous because if one of our guys gets hit, it's a go." So
Yeah.
they're now in Poland. So our entire diplomatic corps is in Poland. Most of the European diplomatic corps is still here, and that is a reason why we think that Lviv is a little bit safer than other locations. The only other diplomatic mission that I'm aware of that's diminished its capacity is the Brits, and that's only their ambassador who went over to Warsaw, whereas the rest of their diplomatic team is still here. So that's the status
Right.
of the International Diplomatic Corps.
Phil, I have to sign off 5 minutes ahead of time because I have a podcast at 11 that I'm doing. So I'm going to let you go, and we will do this again very soon. And I appreciate you being here and having this full
And since
conversation. Yeah.
and
Okay.
we'll work out the technical difficulties, but because we're not on radio, and I'm going to take every last chance and opportunity to do this. Fuck Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck the far right and their fellow traveler
Mm-hmm.
bullshit with the Russians. They're
Right.
wrong. Fuck the Russians. Fuck Putin. And
Mm-hmm.
I know which side of the fence I'm on, and I stand with the Ukrainians. And I'm right, and I don't have any doubt in my mind or in my heart. These people are going through a 1776 revolution that should have happened back in the 17th century with the Cossack
Right.
hetmanites who were trying to actually build a democracy here. So fuck them all. Fuck this bullshit.
Yeah.
And God bless liberal democracy.
Right. Thank you. See, isn't that
Thank you,
freeing?
Hal.
It's
Thank
lovely.
you, Sparklers. Your
Yeah.
audience is amazing.
Yeah. Thanks, audience, for being
Oh,
here for this conversation. We appreciate you guys
your audience
for
is
being with us
amazing.
today.
Love you guys.
They're great.
Love you. We'll work out the technical difficulties.
We
I
totally
promise.
will. I mean, it's the nature of, I don't even know that there's anything to work out. It's just the fact that you're there and I'm here, and that's how life is. This is the limitations of reality. My grandmother used to hand crank a phone. She didn't go, I got to work on this crank. They need a smoother one. We need to grease this thing up. It's just how it worked. You know, that's just life. Okay, so I'm going to let you go. Let me see, make sure I have the
Well,
right
I always like
screen. Yeah.
talking with you, Hal. And thanks
Yeah.
for your audience. Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
absolutely.
I'm
Thanks.
leaving.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
And
Hal. We need to
yeah,
talk directly sometime.
we do.
And if you want me
Absolutely.
again tomorrow for your radio show, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm always
Well,
here.
I'll
I'm
bring you.
always here.
I'll bring you in.
I'm always here for you and your audience.
I would love to do that. So take care of yourself, and we will talk to you soon. Okay. And chat room, I'll let you go. There you
I
go.
will.
And
Thanks, guys.
yeah, there you go. There you go. So he just signed off. Thanks for watching today, and I'm glad we got to talk to Philip. I've been wanting to do that with some regularity, and the technical issues around doing it are always a bit of a tooth pull. That's why I had to do it out here in the in the extra office. But I have to split. I have 4 minutes to get to my next thing, and so I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself, and I will see you guys later this afternoon for the regular show, 3 p.m. Pacific. And be well.